Hi guys, this is Tom Broussard. Another day. I'm going to talk today about TIAs, the Transient Ischemic Attack, TIAs, minor stroke, small stroke, whatever you want to call it. The last couple of weeks, I talked about my open heart and TAVR. Then we talked about the unexplained strokes. And this time today, we're going to talk about the TIA. In my case, all of these explanations are just because they happen to me. I wouldn't be doing this if I was trying to explain it to somebody else, that they had certain things and I'd have to go read it up and explain it. Half the time I can't even pronounce these words. But the fact that I actually did go through them and have studied them, that's really the only reason I'm here. But I think I told you before, one of the really good reasons is that I didn't know any of this before at all. So really, through everything I now do, this is my job. Can you only imagine? When I was 59, I was, quote, perfect. Health-wise, lots of sports, all kinds of things, had no idea what was waiting for me at the end of that. And it all has to do with plaque. And if that's the beginning, then really the beginning of that is, where does the plaque come from other than genetics and your diet and just the way the body works. But for sure, I figured that it was time to spend the rest of my time on the planet just helping people better understand about how the body works and how a lot of it can get, quote, better if you work at it. So anyway, today is going to be the TIA. I had my TIA 4 months after my first stroke. After my first stroke, I did get that drug called TPA. It is what dissolves the clot. And you have to get it within 3 hours, and I got it within 3 hours. In fact, because my right side was weak, I couldn't see from the right side, the drug did stop that, dissolve the clot, and I got better 2 days later. And I also at that point, lost my language, so I still had aphasia, but my body got better. Not yet knowing that I'd also lost my language, and the drug wouldn't help you with that. But with the TIA, as I began to understand, I desperately didn't want to have to use that drug again. I did not want another stroke. When I had my first stroke, remember, I looked at my shoes, and that was it. I became unconscious from my perspective, but my body would still move because my wife looked back and saw that I was crawling to the curb, but I was still totally unconscious. And basically every day after you have your first stroke, you are deathly aware and worried that you'll have another stroke. Most people with strokes, you go up after you have one to have another. So I was just worried to death. And sure enough, 4 years later, I was just driving home with my wife from a 5,000-mile trip, doing lots of presentations about stroke and aphasia around the country. My last presentation was a day or two before, just outside of New Orleans at Hammond, at a university there. And we had just drove the rest of the way home, and we were still unpacking the car. It was late in the evening, 8 or 9 at night. My wife was just a couple feet ahead of me. We're moving things around, and I stumbled I assume on a rug, but I felt something. And with the next step, I could feel darkness descending. And that's the way it felt to me. I could actually see unconsciousness coming, as opposed to my first stroke when I just saw my shoes and then went the other way. Did not understand any of that. Wasn't conscious of that. In this case, with the TIA, with that next step, I could tell that something was happening. It was happening bad. And I said one word, and I said, trouble. Laura was just ahead of me. She turned around, saw I was having a stroke, sat me down, and went next door to her sisters and called 911. The interesting thing was about the sensation of this was that I was still awake. I got incredibly, I'll call it foggy. I've used that before too. When you have a TIA, which is typically, and who knows, I didn't know that it was a stroke about to happen big or a TIA. I just knew that this was trouble with my brain. And I didn't know that it would become somewhat temporary. But since I was still conscious, foggy, but a friend next door came, said, "How you doing?" I said, looking around, could still see the world, but almost again in a fog. And the ambulance came a few minutes later, and they came to the door and came in, and they said, "Can you walk?" And I must have said, "Yeah." And they walked me to the ambulance with two people, I'm sure. But again, this is all new to me. Now on the inside, knowing I just had a stroke, I didn't know what was happening at that time. So they took me to the ambulance and then took me to the hospital local. And by, I'll say it was 10, 11 at night. And at that point, I was, quote, getting better, meaning less foggy. And I started insisting that I get TPA, because that's what I had the first time. I figured, oh, this means that I'll get better if they give it to me. Again, not knowing, as I now know here, that with the TIA, typically you will not get TPA. And in fact, you can get more damage as a result of using it. So I didn't know that at the time. I was just getting more and more insistence that I was going to get TPA. And I knew it was 3 hours that I had to have it done. So I kept looking at the clock, looking to the nurses and doctors. They'd come and go. I kept, every time they came in, I said, "I want TPA." Well, of course, the fact that I was actually saying those words probably meant that I was not going to get them. But again, not knowing any of this at the time, again, that's why I share it now for everybody now, just really adopting this new collective consciousness of how we learn anything, but especially something like this, which is just so terrible, to the degree that we're able to articulate it for you. That's my job. And I'll continue to do this through Stroke Month as well as Aphasia Month, which is next month. But anyway, the time went by. It was after 3 hours. By the morning, I don't know if I slept all night or not, but by the morning I realized, okay, A, I didn't get TPA. B, I must be getting somewhat better. And they moved me to a room, and I stayed there for 6 days, and began to find out that that in this particular case, since my original stroke was still an really fully unexplained stroke, other than what I assumed had happened, in this case, they told me that one of the neck arteries, the carotid arteries, both of them were terribly clogged, and one appeared to be ragged. And sure enough, because the physical issues of the TIA was on my right side, that means it was my left side that started. And they said, "So you're going to stay here. We're going to clean this out. And we'll clean out the other one too, but it takes time between the two." And sure enough, I was there for 6 days. I asked Laura for my diary because I wanted to see if I could read or write or speak. It's been 4 years. I had gotten back. I desperately wanted to know. I did get my diary. I did write in it for 2 weeks. I began to see that I could write words. I could write sentences. They were highly jagged off the line, but at least I could tell that I didn't have, quote, aphasia, although it's maybe a TIA of its kind, so more of a TIA aphasia for a couple weeks. But within a couple weeks, I stopped writing my diary again. By then, I was writing books. But yes, that was also very, very important as the day went through. But another thing that happened on my right side, because people ask, was it perfect with the TIA? It turns out that I also had this thing called, I have to say it to you because it's a long word, hypothermia. Basically, I can't tell the difference between hot and cold. And you can actually, if you are on the inside, you can tell this one is good, this one is bad. Even though I can do these things, I can't grip quite as well. I can't even tell if I'm gripping in the same way. It's what I call dead gripping. And I can't tell hot or cold. And at the beginning, I realized that when I scalded myself, leaving it too long, and then finally start scolding. And now whenever I'm washing dishes, I have to put my left hand in. I put this one back, feel at the top. Okay, now I can use that. And you have to be careful of that for sure. To tell you another story, I was at Dunkin' Donuts and just recently, and they gave me obviously before the stroke, they gave me a hot coffee, as they always do, gave it to me, and the top slipped off and it spilled all over my hand, all over. I couldn't even take out my wallet because it was soaked, and I was just looking for napkins, but they were far away, and I didn't know what to do, but it didn't hurt me. I couldn't tell. So somebody went and got me the napkins. I cleaned up, paid for it. Everything was fine. I get a couple minutes or two later, as I get to the house, to the car, I said, Laura, this feels bad. I was scalded. I had no idea how hot it was, but at least I didn't have the sensation of the hot. It just seeped into there such that the body itself was scalded. So yes, it is very interesting with all these things about the brain. But I did not get the TPA, and I did get better after a bit. Got the artery cleaned out on the left, and 4 months later had this one done on the right. That too helps a lot, so that you won't, hopefully, you won't get anything to do with your brain. But that was the case in my case. Another additional part of this is that my brother had a stroke. Many of you know my brother. My brother had a stroke just a little over a year ago. As you might know, my stroke was on the left side. It turns out my brother had one on the right side. Small vessel, deep inside, fell down, had to get the ambulance. By then, his wife, Sue, called, and I stayed on the call for about 2 hours while they came, got Rob, took hospital, ambulance took him to the hospital, thought he was having a TIA because, and I hear this because it came from Sue and the people around, that Rob his droop was down and it was going up and then down and then up. And they thought, oh, it's a TIA and it's getting better, so we're not going to give him TPA. But they could see other issues were happening. They went to that hospital, put him in another ambulance, took him to another hospital, more neuro-centered. And in the ambulance, his droop went away. And I mean, it went down and clearly was having a stroke. They decided to give him the TPA. It didn't work. In case you know, TPA, as much as it is a miracle drug, it did not help with Rob. So his left side has the issues of severe weakness in his left hand and foot and leg, but does not have aphasia, because typically if you have aphasia, it almost 100% means that it came from the left side because it lands in that area here or here or here. Not 100% because there's other places throughout the brain, but the TPA didn't work. And that is because it was just a different kind of stroke. Where was it? The severity? Is it so far in that it can't even get the molecules in there such that they can actually act in the way they chemically need to do, because they just don't have enough critical mass of molecules to get in there and do what it has to do with the active ingredients. So yes, it is an amazing thing. The brain is an amazing thing. It does the damage it does. The good thing is that the brain, the remaining cells, are tremendously powerful to work with your memory and language as well as your body. So that's the scene for today, talking about TPA. Thank you very much. It is Stroke Month. I'll continue to talk through the week. I'm not sure if I'll just talk about stroke, but certainly aphasia. And then we get to aphasia month coming up soon. So you'll be hearing a lot more about also going forward. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon. Take care of yourselves. Stay healthy. Bye.